Good afternoon. Welcome to Cash Flow Expo 2024, everyone. Super excited to be with you here on this year's edition. Some great speakers. Hope you're learning a lot. I know that I am, and I've been in this field and what I do for over 20 years. So today we're going to talk about how to think, act, and be the bank. We're going to talk specifically about private mortgages, the creating of the notes, underwriting, and compliance. And then I'm going to bring on at the end some experts, and we're going to talk about some of the common mistakes that a lot of people are making when they're either buying notes or creating notes through using the use of private lenders. So let's get after it. So who am I? Well, I am Nick Legamaro. I am a creative financing expert. Some of my notable achievements for those that do not know who I am, I've done over 1,200 creative financing transactions. I sold a private mortgage note creating business and transaction management company to a federally chartered bank. I'm a published author. I'm the founder of the Creative Dealmaker community and a Creative Dealmaker Academy. I created the Perfect Note Blueprint. And most recently, we just launched a software called Deal Evaluator, which specifically focuses on wrap mortgage and private mortgage transactions. So enough about me. Let's talk about what we're going to get into today. So real quick, take my information down. If you anything that you have questions on after the presentation, please reach back out to me. There it is right there. If you have any questions on buying, selling, creating, auditing notes, or certification, please reach out to us at USA Note Pro. Be happy to assist you as we can. Plus, we're going to be providing some other goodies and giveaways and freebies at the end of this presentation. So why should you listen to me? Okay, well, maybe you shouldn't, but I've been doing this for quite a bit of time. I do one thing well, and it's create private mortgages. And most importantly, what we're going to talk about here today is the underwriting and the compliance that goes in conjunction to creating private mortgages and the disadvantages that we have relative to a traditional bank. You may have seen me on podcasts, may have heard me from stage, may have read some of my publications, but Google me, find out if there's somebody that you should be trusting. But who is this training for? Okay, for me, it's very simple. It's for anybody that wants to be a private money lender, either directly through a self-directed IRA or their own funds. If you want to be a note buyer, which is not much different than being a private money lender, it's just where you come in the process. And if you're a landlord, being able to convert yourself from being a landlord into a lien lord or a note holder, something super important to listen to here today. Guys, and if you ever want to listen to what we have to say, come and join us live on our training support calls. We talk about underwriting, we talk about compliance, we talk about private mortgage note creating and how we do it and why we do it. Go to sub2zoom.com. You can register, join us anytime that we're live. Hope to see you there. So why do I like and love private mortgages? Okay, I don't know if you can see me up there on the top. Well, first of all, we can help hardworking families obtain home ownership when banks have said no. This is really, really important. We've done this over 1,000 times just in Texas alone. Super important to be able to provide that opportunity of home ownership. But as a note holder, note buyer, note creator, or a private money lender, you can receive massive cash flows off being a lender. Okay, you can also receive large future payouts and payoffs in the time that those notes get paid out or paid off in the future. We can also help sellers out of bad situations through creating private notes that we can control. And it's also easier to get a seller to say yes to a full price offer through creative financing. Super, super important. We're going to talk about the Perfect Note Blueprint in just a real high level overview. Some of you guys may have heard us talk about this in the past, but really these are the components of it. It's finding the property, then analyzing the deal, if it's a deal or not a deal, funding the deal, which is through a private money lender or a note buyer, then finding the private note, not creator, but the owner finance buyer, all the legal documents that go along with this, the transaction management, and the buyer themselves, because we are dealing with consumers on an owner finance property. So you have to understand all the things that go along with it, with underwriting and doc prep and servicing and insurance and all the disclosures and SAFE Act and CFPB and Dodd-Frank, all these things that a lot of people do not do in the private mortgage space. We're going to talk about how to do them correctly, and more importantly, how to protect yourself in the event that you want to become a note holder or a private money lender. We're going to talk about how to be the bank, which this is the whole point of what we're talking about, and why we like amortization versus depreciation. And then how do you manage the note portfolio once you get these notes in here? We're going to show and talk about that as well. So 4 things that you must do, okay? 4 things you must do on every deal. It doesn't matter if it's you or somebody else in the process. You got to find the deal, you got to analyze it, you have to fund it, which is where the private money lender or the note buyer comes in, and you got to find the owner finance buyer. Everything else, I'm going to say this twice, everything else can and should be done for you. You should not be doing anything other than these 4 components. You need to hire and have trained professionals that specialize in private mortgage note creating, doing these transactions for you. And we can help assist you with that. We do it for some of the clients, but more importantly, we'll provide you the blueprint so that you can take this and do it yourself, or have, not yourself, but have your team do it on your behalf, okay? Why is this important? Well, it's my $6 million mistake, okay? And I didn't lose $6 million, but I lost the opportunity to earn an additional $6 million. And the reason being is because of improper note creating on my first 400 notes that I created. I've done over 1,200 notes, probably that's when I stopped counting. But the first 423 to be exact, I did them wrong. I didn't do them illegally, I just did them wrong. I didn't do them with best business practices and best banking principles in mind. And this is what we're going to talk about and share with you today. So why should you create the perfect note and be the bank? Well, I just told you my 6 million reasons why you should, and maybe you should listen to, because I don't want you to have to go through the same things that I went through, and more importantly, want to protect your investment. But before we get there, we got to talk about how big the seller carry market is. And when I talk about seller carry market, I'm talking about private mortgages that are created that aren't done with the assistance of Bank of America, Wells Fargo, Chase, B of A, those are the traditional lenders, okay? And the seller carry market right now is about $24 billion a year. In the last 4 years, there's been over $100 billion of private mortgages created. That's a significant number in the grand scheme of things of mortgages that are created that most realtors and loan officers that are dealing in the traditional space do not even understand. But really the question I want to ask is, and you need to ask yourself, why is the seller carry market so big? And the reason why it's so big is because 60 to 70% of today's population can't qualify for a traditional mortgage. They can't go down to Bank of America and even qualify for a 7% mortgage, even if they wanted to. And number 2, that less than 5% of all properties that are for sale today even offer seller financing. So when you can put yourself in a position to be a private money lender to a seller financing opportunity to a non-traditional qualified borrower, it's a home run. And this is what we're going to talk about briefly today. Most people think that that have been in this space, or maybe this first time you've been hearing this or seeing this, is that seller financing is for crappy properties and deadbeat borrowers. That's just not the case, okay? And we're going to show that here today. In fact, this statistic here shows that the residential average price was over $250,000. Now, I don't know where you live, but in most states not called California or California or New York, $260,000, $270,000 is a really, really nice property, and it's good to a good borrower. And we're going to show you how to take care of and underwrite that as well. But here's the thing that I really want to focus on right here, okay? Because if you're a note buyer and you're trying to buy somebody else's note that's been created, this is things that you need to know and understand, okay? 84% of mortgage notes that are created privately are done what we call from mom and pop note creators. They do one note in 12 months. They may be the only note they use. They're not under the guidelines of Dodd-Frank, even though they well should be using best business practices, and they don't create notes properly. They don't emulate what a bank does. And as a result of that, This is where value comes into play, where missing files come into play. Everything that you do not want to see or not see in the file happens. And if you go to the bottom right over here, only 7%. And thank you to Tracy and Fred and Node Investing Tools and Scott Arpin for the data here. Okay, can't see it, it's at the bottom, but only 7% of all private mortgages, only 7% of that $25 billion is created by individual small cap lenders, companies like ourselves, and they only do 4 notes or more a year. That is, we'll do over hundreds of these notes in 1 year, but only 7%. So as a private note buyer, if you're trying to buy this paper, it's extremely risky because of these things that are happening or not happening in the underwriting. In fact, if you look at the bottom here, 90% of all private mortgages fail compliance in bank underwriting standards and guidelines. Think about that for a second. This is why you need such a deep discount when you buy a note, regardless if it's performing or non-performing, because there's something that's probably wrong with that file. Okay, and we're going to talk about some of the things that you need to be looking out for. So, guys, if you go and send us an email, we'll give you access to our recent training where we did a deep dive into private mortgages, compliance, and underwriting. We have all these different topics that subject matter experts on to share our findings. Extremely valuable. Please reach out, and we're more than happy to provide you access. So, one of the things that we built, I said, and one of the last things in my bio is that we just created this new software called Deal Evaluator. And the reason that the software is there is to be able to calculate complex transactions using private money and wrap mortgages. So this is just a screenshot. So in this particular one of the note opportunities that came out of it was this note for $45,285 and a 15% interest rate at 60% fully amortized over 5 years. So this is when I talked about before, who is this for? Self-directed IRAs, private money lenders, note buyers. This is an opportunity for you guys to learn and understand how to create a note or how to participate in the creating of a private note so you can have a safe, secured investment that's securitized by the asset itself. So I'm just showing this to you. We're not going to talk about this today. We'll get you access to this, training to this, if it's something that's of interest to you. This is just a tool that we use to create the note. Okay. Here is another one. This was another one that we did where it was $45,000 again at 12%. Similar note. Rates change based on the position of the note, the collateral itself, the borrower, things along those lines. There's a range on this stuff. There again, these notes are available for sale. So if you want to buy a note that looks similar to this, reach out to us and we'll give you a list or put you on our lender list so you can review any of these opportunities. Okay. This is from the investor side. This is the actual property. The deal goes in, but you can see that this total profit on this deal is going to yield the creator of this $175,000. So if you want to learn how to create these notes, we're happy to share with you. Come join us on our free live Q&A calls, support and training, and you can learn exactly how to do this as well. All right, let's get into why you're here. Okay, why you want to be the bank. Okay, well, for me, why I want to be the bank, because it's about controlling, not owning. I don't want to own anything. I want to control all of it. That's why banks are the biggest buildings in almost every town. That's why they occupy the main intersections of every downtown or city. This is economics 101, guys. This is about supply and demand. When we can control the demand and we control the supply, we win. It's about amortization versus depreciation, secured asset. It's about being a lien lord, not a landlord. And it's an alternative investment secured by real estate. This is what we're talking about. This is what people want to see in their portfolios if it's the right asset and it's the right collateral file and it's done properly. So how important is structuring the deal? Okay, this is like the most important, in my opinion, the most important part of it. This is where most people fail. They do not structure the debt properly. They do not underwrite the borrower correctly. They don't follow compliance and underwriting guidelines that have been set forth that are followed just like bank. When I say think, act, and be a bank, this is exactly one of the things we're talking about here. You need a structured deal just like Bank of America. Even though you might not be required, you should follow best banking and business practices. Okay, so I'm going to use some of the numbers here. This is from PaperStack. It's the end of the year report from 2022. These numbers have not changed over time. But I want to point out a couple of points here. Number one, okay, if you look at where the star is, on a first position performing note, the average price was 82% of UPB, unpaid principal balance. That means if it was a $100,000 note, that seller of that note got $82,000. That is ridiculous. But why did they get $82,000 only for that? It's because they probably didn't stack the collateral file. There was a bunch of scratch and dents on it for whatever reason. Maybe the borrower wasn't underwritten properly. Maybe they didn't service the payments or escrow taxes and insurance, or they did something, they wrote a contract for deed versus a mortgage deed of trust. These are all factors that violate what a traditional bank would do, and we want to make sure that we mimic exactly what a bank does. This is very, very important, because at the end of the day, when it goes through our underwriting and compliance and structure, we see values, the note value average above 90%, actually closer to 92%. So an 8% higher than the national average will yield on a $5 million portfolio an additional $400,000 in value. That's value on paper. The true value is actually much higher than that. And I use what I call the Ford F-150 example. I'm in Texas. Think of it like this. You have two identical, you have two Ford F-150 pickup trucks. They're both white, tan interior. They both have 100,000 miles on it. One is in pristine condition. The other one doesn't have any maintenance records. You know, if the oil's been changed, it's been beat up, it's scratched, the interior is destroyed, the windshield's broken. Which one of these has more value? The one that has the records, the one that's been maintained. Okay, which one do you have more confidence in that it's going to perform for you? The one that you can prove is there. So at the end of the day, when you create the note from the beginning, you're able to create basically a brand new car. Everybody would prefer a brand new car than something that's used, that you don't have the historical track record of or knowledge of it. Okay, this is why banks, hedge funds, private equity groups, and family offices pay over UPB on interest rates that are far less than the typical private mortgage, because they know it was underwritten correctly. Okay, they're about capital preservation, not about trying to make a 20% return, because they know that 50% of the portfolio is gonna go sideways. Okay, so how do you create this perfect note that we all talk about, right? How do we act and create a note that looks like Bank of America? Well, it's easier. Well, it's harder to do than we talk about. Okay, and it really boils down to this. I just pulled this up. This is the collateral file by the numbers. Okay, I just pulled a collateral file on a property, and this is what I found: 500 plus pages of 500 plus pages of documentation, over 100 different documents, over 40 disclosures. Okay, that were signed by the borrower. So my question is, what do your note files look like that you either lend on or that you buy? Because if they don't mimic and look like this, you need to ask the question, why? Okay, because if you're missing some of this, I didn't put these in there because I felt like it. I put it in because this is what a bank would typically do. So I'm not going to go into all these. I'm just showing you some of the names of all the files that are here. Okay, these are just the files on the purchase side of the deal. Okay, because if you're a note buyer or a lender, you want to know what happened at the very beginning of the transaction, right? You want to see it from the beginning. You want to see all of this stuff. Okay, these are some of the documents. Okay, these are some of the documents, if not all of them, form the sell side when we sell it. Okay, most of these you may have seen, maybe you haven't, but you got to ask your questions. Why is it or not in my package or your package that you're looking to buy or lend on? Okay, here is the collateral file for the borrower that we're lending to, or you're buying the note on. These are the documents. Okay, this what represents all of this. Super, super important. And if they're not in your package, you need to ask the question why. So how do we get this, create this perfect note blueprint? Well, again, it starts at the beginning. The deal evaluator software that's been customized for this helps in that process, number one. Then number two is that we have this turnkey nationwide transaction management solution to protect the integrity of the deal. Okay, we want to protect the buyer, we want to protect the seller, we want to protect the lenders, we want to protect all parties involved. And the only way we know to do it is make sure that we emulate the bank underwriting guidelines and build this for everybody involved. And these are some of the companies and partners that we have to help build this note on behalf of our lenders, on behalf of our buyers, on behalf of our sellers. Okay, so this is all part of done for you. This is the turnkey, transaction management solution. Why is this important? Okay, now we talked about this in the beginning. 4 things that need to be done first: find it, analyze it, fund it, find a buyer. Everything else, outsource to somebody that's capable and competent to do it on your behalf. Okay, when it's done by USA Home Partners, was one of our companies, these documents are fully underwritten. It's everything that I just showed in the beginning. Super important. They're Dodd-Frank compliant. They're qualified mortgage loans. They're serviced by a third party. They're always mortgage and deeds of trust, never a contract for deeds, because a bank would never do a contract for deed. So why should I, or why should you? Not saying there's anything wrong with it, but there's a reason why banks don't do contract for deeds. Okay, one, because they're protected by writing a mortgage deed of trust. They're just going to control it anyway. We're going to also manage all of this transaction in-house with doc prep. We're not going to give it to some random attorney or title company to do this. We're going to use our documents that have been done specifically, that have been vetted by banks and private mortgage note buyers to do this. This is all part of our chain of custody that stays under our control and jurisdiction. This is the same proprietary system that I sold to the federally chartered bank, but on steroids now, because now we have technology that helps us do this at a very high level as well. We also have the mortgage post-closing quality control audits that we use with third-party auditors. At the end of the day, the most important thing I'll say is that this is institutional grade underwriting and note creating in a private mortgage note sector. Okay, super important. And what my job and my role is, and what I want to see that doesn't exist in the private mortgage note space, is consistency. But most importantly, we want to protect the integrity of the transaction. Okay, we want to protect the seller, we want to protect the buyer, we want to protect the lender, and we want to protect the deal maker themselves. Okay, once you get the notes done and get into portfolio, this is one of our strategic partners. This is through Note Unlimited. You guys may have seen them. I think they're actually speaking on Cashflow Expo. But what we've done is we've taken the platform and we've enhanced it specifically for these private mortgage notes when there's multiple notes on the platform. So when you see this next screen here, this particular asset, this property has 4 notes on it. There's an underlying first and second lien, and then there's a wrap to our buyer, and it's all controlled and managed, and we can see all this in the portal. We'll make sure we get this available to you. If you have notes that you're creating or buying or leveraging, this is a software that we use to manage that as well. Okay. Common mistakes made by borrowers, lenders, note buyers. Okay. I'm going to bring on my panel of experts right now, and we're going to talk about some of this stuff. Okay. We're going to talk about underwriting. We're going to talk about compliance, doc prep, servicing, insurance docs, and management of the actual transaction. And who am I going to have on? The team of experts, some of my most trusted advisors that I've worked with over time that we're going to bring on here in just a few seconds is Alan Sesker. He is title attorney. He is one of the most educated and seasoned professionals when it comes to wrap mortgages and private mortgage creation. I'm going to bring on Sahel, who is also an expert on the servicing side of this and an RMLO. And I'm going to bring in Mahmoud as well, who is a note buyer and a private money lender himself, and is going to add light to that as well. So hang tight. I'm going to bring him on, and let's get right into it, and we'll be good to go. All right, I got the OG of OGs for most OGs as they go. So real quick, I got Alan Sesker. I can never say your name, but that's how you say it. Title attorney, private mortgage note specialist, whether it be wrap or creative or whatever. but more importantly, doc prep, underwriting, structuring the deals. We're going to talk about that. Got Sohail on here, who is a servicer. Also, you do other things too. You used to come from a private, or excuse me, a mortgage lending background, right? So you understand how traditional lenders create notes and what the criteria is. Super, super important. Mahmoud, you know, you're a private money lender and a note buyer. And how many notes have you? How many notes do you think you've looked at, Mahmoud, over your? Oh, let me hit my timer on there before I don't go late on you. Go ahead. Sorry about that. I want to make sure I don't go too long. I'll be talking forever. No, Mahmoud, how many notes have you looked at in your career? Do you think either created, bought, sold? Just because you don't buy and fund on everything, but you do look at a lot. I mean, how many? 5, 10, 20?
Well, I've been doing this since 2012, so I've even lost count. But I wouldn't be surprised if I'd done more than 1,000.
Yeah, at least probably 1,000. Okay, so how critical for you as a lender or a note buyer is underwriting of the file?
Well, it's crucial. You certainly want to make sure that the paper is legitimate. It's originated legally. You have the documents dotted, the I's dotted and the T's crossed. The numbers that appear on these documents actually are real. A lot of all that goes into that.
What? So let's just give you a conservative number of 1,000. I know it's more than that because I probably sent you more than that, but 1,000. Let's just use that as a round number. Of all the files you look at, let's call it 1,000. How many of those files do you look at? Did you find to be? You can either look at it one way or the other. Either they were perfectly stacked file and they would look and mimic what Bank of America, Wells Fargo, Chase would do, and how many of them had problems with it? Like, obviously the exception to the rule, right? So just give me, just help us understand what percentage of, or what number of 1,000 do you think were really, really good, high quality underwritten notes?
I would say 75% were well written, because a number of them were institutional.
Okay, let's take the institutional out of it because we know they know what they're doing, right? This is the whole point of why we're talking about this. Private note creators don't have the luxury of the integration of a traditional bank, right? And I'm going to bring this to Alan in a second. Alan, well, let's ask you, when a bank is going to fund a deal, right? And a traditional buyer goes to the bank and gets a loan. Do you do any of the document prep or trading on any of that stuff?
The only document we're going to do is the warranty deed on 50% of the time. Other than that, everything's coming from counsel for the lender.
Right. The lender's going to tell you what to do. The lender's going to create their own loan documents. The lender's going to give you the instructions. They don't want you touching their files. Would you agree?
Yeah, there's 2 or 3 pages of instructions that we have to follow.
2 or 3 pages, but they're going to do all of that. Super important, because in a private space, this is what we know. Mom and pop note creators, okay, they don't have the luxury of all this integration that a bank does. They don't have in-house attorneys, like they don't have servicers. They don't have the ability to underwrite the buyers. So as a private mortgage note creator, you have to outsource this. It's still required, and even if it's not required because of the number of deals that you do, it's still best business practices and banking principles that need to be followed. So that's why we're talking about this, so that when you don't have the ability to have your own in-house counsel create a lender doc, you just don't go out to some random title company and random attorney to create them on your behalf, because guess what they don't probably do? And I'll ask Sohail this question. Sohail, how many times do you get a note that gets sent to you that they ask to be put on your platform, the service? Do you see errors in the way that they were underwritten?
So from node creation standpoint, we're looking at literally 40% of the notes being drawn up incorrectly.
40% of the note. Now, how much of that is crossing T's and dotting I's, and how much of it's really more legal? Because it could be one or the other.
So for me, the legal stuff, it's not major. Just some of the nuances that are placed in a note where they don't even belong. Those are just some of the strange stuff. I came across a note yesterday where they created it with 7 different payment schedules. Interest only payments for the first 6 months will
And
be
this is a consumer loan. This is a consumer loan?
This is a consumer loan.
Okay, let's clarify, because an investor loan and a consumer loan debt is entirely different, right? So
Yes.
when we start playing around with consumers, it's a whole different ballgame. That's
True.
the bottom line here. When you're a lender to a consumer, you got things like SAFE Act and SB 43 in the state of Texas,
Yep.
Dodd-Frank. You got to worry about the CFPB. There's a lot of things that you need to be aware of. And this is why creating this perfect note and underwriting it properly and trying to emulate the bank is so critical. Not only from a note buyer's perspective or being a lender on these deals, but also just from preventing the what you're talking about now that's going to become a problem at some point potentially in the future. So go ahead and tell us what you found in these deals, because I'm telling you right now, I will tell you, I've written over 1,200 mortgages. Now, maybe all mine are perfect. They're not, okay? But I will tell you this. I have not had, you're telling me 40%, and that comes into your world, you find something wrong with it. You know how many times of all the notes that I've had serviced outside of Provident, how many times a servicer has come to me and said, you know what, there's a problem with your note? Out of, you know, whether it be, I'm not going to throw names out because that's not what we do, but servicers that aren't named Provident or from you know how many of them in my world, out of probably 1,500 of them, zero. And I can promise you I'm not perfect. Okay, so this is super important, because the whole reason why we do this and why we want to manage this from the beginning, when Alan comes involved in this, and when it gets to the end when you're involved, it's the checks and balances to make sure that everything is done. So give us an example. You have all these wrong amortizations, because what typically happened is that, I'm guessing, a private mortgage note creator, the mom and pop or whatever you want to call it, they said, hey, they probably went to the title company, say, I'm going to sell or finance this. Can you help me with my documents? Is that typically what happens? That's just a hail, by the way. Is that typically?
So that's been my experience. That's how I see it. Now, obviously, Alan would be more qualified to answer that. But my experience has been they go to a title company, and the title company attorney or the escrow officer will ask them questions. How do you want the note set up? And they're basically giving them a set of guidelines based on their understanding. There are no closing instructions provided. If you were to provide because really the title company is there, and Alan, correct me if I'm wrong, the way I see it is they will take instructions from the lender. So if the closing date, for example, is today, January's closing date, they will, and a lender is asked, when do you want the first payment date to be? First thing in their mind would be February 1st. Well, you're just not giving enough days in the process to where if the first payment due date is February 1st, that majority of your payment will get applied to principal. You really didn't earn the entire payment there as interest. And what that does is it actually throws off your entire amortization. When you print an amortization schedule, it will print it based on a certain schedule. And now you've thrown it off, and you've shaved a few months off your loan because the note was not created properly.
So let me jump in. Let me jump in for a second, because it needs to be clarified early. We, whether we're law or title office, whichever one you're using us to draft the loan documents or to close the transaction, we are not a replacement for Provident. We are not going to be looking out to protect you in regard to all of those items. When we come and say, hey, what's your fill out this document and tell us the terms you want for your note. And one we were just drafting yesterday, it said for the first year, no prepayments allowed. The second year, prepayment at 15%. Third year, prepayment, I think 8%, and then fourth and fifth year.
Is this a
Understand,
consumer loan or an investor loan?
it was an investor to a consumer, so consumer loan.
Okay,
And so understand you just messed up on year one because you can't have a prohibition against paying off the mortgage. You can
Right.
have a prepayment penalty, but then even with the prepayment penalty, we're not going to tell you if you're in compliance with Dodd-Frank, Texas Finance Code, all of those things. That's SOHEL. So we are not a replacement for them. It needs to be understood because people come to us asking us these things, and we just say you need to get with an RMLO and get this
but
figured out.
you're at least providing that feedback to the seller or the lender in this situation. What I'm talking about is what Sohail was referring to, is that some rando attorney that works for a title company goes and creates it because they don't know what questions to ask and what flags to raise as a result of it. So, you know, this is the problem, okay? And they don't know what they say. Because let me ask you a question, Alan. Do you, when you have a seller that's going to be a private lender on their property or whatever it is, do you ask them for, hey, are you going to service this in escrow, taxes, and insurance? Do you ask them that?
The contract documents do ask that.
They do, okay? And those are the documents that we provide and we want them to use, okay? But let me ask you a question. Do you think most attorneys at title companies that on privately created mortgages even ask that question or even think to ask that question? Because it's not part of the, because all that usually comes from the lender instructions. Bank of America tells you what to do. So you're just going to say, most attorneys are just going to come in and say, yeah, I'll write you the promissory note. And they're not even going to ask about, we'll also sell this because he sees it on the servicing side. How often do you see stuff that doesn't have servicing as part of the note or escrowing of taxes and insurance that come in? Well, servicing might be there, but taxes and insurance.
So we see the taxes and insurance in many cases. That's something that many of the investors or lenders think about because they want to make sure that the asset is protected, doesn't get foreclosed on because of a tax sale or whatever the case may be. The couple of errors, and this is very frequent that we notice, are the lender will issue either tax credits to the borrower. It's a nice gesture because it reduces their cash to close, but guess what? Now we have to chase after your borrower to collect that money, otherwise run an escrow analysis, and all of a sudden their payment just goes up significantly, so we can cover that shortfall when the taxes are due. With insurance, one of the things that we're seeing frequently is they're not requiring their borrower to prepay 12 months of insurance at closing. And they expect the servicer to collect it monthly and pass it on to the insurance company. As a servicer, we will not do that. We will
So let's
ideally
talk about that for a second, because this is really important for two things. So if they've already closed on it, right? Because they don't, until the transaction is closed at the title company, you don't even see this information until it's after the fact, correct?
It's too late. Yep.
It's too late. That's the problem with all of this. It's too late when it gets to you. Okay. So if it's too late when it gets to you, well, it's too bad, right? I mean, you can't, I mean, that's the way it goes. You can go rewrite the note, I guess, and loan. Good luck getting the borrower to agree to that, right?
Right.
So Mahmoud, as a note buyer or a lender, when you see that file that comes in the servicer and you get the collateral file and you see something like this, how much of an impact does that have either A, on your desire to buy the note, okay, or B, how much penalty or discount would you assess for something as simple as that could have been prevented from the beginning if it was done properly?
Well, I would assess the potential of that note continuing to pay and see if there may be any hurdles along the way that could trigger this situation. I rely on the servicer to keep the escrow straight. So if there is an imbalance there, then I know every 12 months or so they catch up on it. But yes, if it's a significant error, a significant flaw, then it's probably going to be a pass or a huge discount.
Okay, so I got Mahmoud here. So Mahmoud, give me the top 2 or 3 things that you see on a regular basis when you're doing a note evaluation that you go, oh my God, I can't believe that was done. I'm either out or it's going to cost them a 10 or 15 point, deduction in a discount? What are the top 2 or 3 things that you say?
I pay a lot of significance to the servicing records, how
Okay.
they are posted.
Okay.
Are the accounts posted actually what the PNI are? The escrow, of course, I cannot control very much, but I know if it's being escrowed, it's being taken care of. But I have had situations where the servicer has posted the PNI totally differently, or they have not adjusted the adjustable interest rate. So that's the first thing, the service.
Okay, great. So Alan, on your side, when it comes in at the beginning, what are the 2 or 3 things that you go, man, you can't do it this way? Or I think I know what it is, but just what are the top, what are the two or three things that people think they can do and they just probably should, they either legally can't do it or they shouldn't do it from just a banking perspective? What are the 2 or 3 things that really stand out on your side? Because you see a lot of transactions.
Yeah. So to answer your question simply, prepayment penalties and balloons.
Okay. People try to put a balloon on a consumer loan.
Yeah, they're just making these up and not going through the arm low and confirming what's allowed or not allowed.
Right. So Sahel, because Sahel's the end of the line, how many notes do you see come in that are consumer loans that have balloons on them?
So fortunately, it's not that many anymore.
Good.
Used to be a couple of years ago, it was a very large number, but the loans that I see from some of the more experienced title companies like Allen's and other attorneys, it looks like they're being created, or at least these folks are taking Allen's advice and creating the notes properly. I had one recently with a balloon note, and it was a Texas wrap, and even the payments were off on it. And so I had to actually reach out to the title company that closed it. This was in Houston, and ask them to fix the error. And 1 year balloon, the payments didn't meet any sort of a payment schedule, unfortunately. And it took them nearly 3 months to get this done because it was more of an education process for me to help them understand how SB 43 works, how the CFPB requirements are. And when they understood, because I couldn't service the loan otherwise, there was no way.
Right.
And so and in fact, the servicing fee was not even disclosed to the borrower. So that's something that they could not fix after the fact. It has to be passed to the lender now. So everything else was corrected. The note was redone and then submitted to us for servicing. So now we're servicing that note.
So Alan, let me ask you a question, and we're going to be wrapping this up in a couple minutes here. How often do you see stuff that comes in? Because you're the beginning of the train. You're the engine. The servicer's the caboose, right? And everything happens in the middle. What do you see on your side as far as people either not wanting to have a deal closed with as a private loan, where you don't see? I know you don't care if it has underwriting or not from a legal perspective, from an RMLO, but just ballpark, what percentage of the deals are you seeing now that are still coming in that there's not an RMLO involved on the transaction?
Fantastic percentage.
Fantastic percentage. What is that, over 50%?
Well over 50% are not utilizing the RMLOs.
And that doesn't mean, because like they say, what is it? The first 3 are for free, right? Or whatever the hell it is, which is ridiculous, because the people that should be using an RMLO are the people that are only doing one of these damn things. I can tell you that right now. Okay. They don't have any business not following Dodd-Frank, in my opinion. Okay. Especially if you're writing. So even if they don't are not legally required to, it's still best business practice to do it. Super, super important. Because Mahmoud, I'm going to ask you the question. What do you see? What is your perception or value of that file that you want to buy a note on when you do not see an underwriting package? How much do you have an automatic? Oh, that's 5-point deduction. What do you, or do you not really care that much about that?
No, seeing an underwriting file is the first thing I'd look at, certainly in a fairly new note. But that is crucial. It's got to be there. It'll lay out the borrower's background, give you a good indication of how good that individual is in all aspects. So it's key.
And if it's not there, what do you think on average the discount is if everything else is okay, like it's a performing note, the buyer's been paying all that stuff, but there's no collateral file. I mean, there's no RMLO package. If you typically were going to pay, say 92%, how much would you pay if that RMLO package wasn't there? Just ballpark.
15 to 20% less.
15 to 20%. That's even more than I thought you were going to say. Okay. 15 to 20%. So let's do the quick math on this. Okay. So if it's $100,000 note, okay, you're saying that just because there's not an, because you don't care if they're required to do it or not, right? That's the whole point of this. You don't care if they're required to do it or not, but you do want it in there. So you're saying on $100,000 note, that note's probably going to be only worth $85,000 instead of $100,000 if they did it. So $15,000 to do, and I mean that's 10 times what it costs to do it right. I mean, it doesn't make any sense not to do it. I mean, just for these reasons. So, Sohail, last thing, and we're going to wrap this up. Number one thing that you can recommend for people that are going to create private mortgage notes that you see are just a problem when they come in, that either A, prevent you from servicing the note at all, because that's a problem in and of itself, right? Or just a best business practice that you ultimately would like to see them, do, or what we can help educate when they create a note.
So the best practice I would recommend is, number one, learn the process before jumping the gun, before creating a note. Learn the process and use an RMLO. Use an RMLO. That would be the key, because there's a lot of guidance that's involved, and you will get that guidance from the RMLO. So,
right, and when we say RMLO, so under the transaction management, the RMLO is one piece of this whole transaction. There's the first part of the transaction, doc prep, making sure the documents are done correctly. Then we have underwriting of the borrower, right? Then you have proper insurance, and you have proper servicing, and you have all those documents that we talked about, the 500 pages and 100 documents and 60 whatever disclosures. That's the collateral file that's stacked. That's what somebody like Mahmoud, a note buyer, is going to want to see to give you maximum value. But more importantly, it's not even about that. I'm guessing, Mahmoud, I'm not putting words in your mouth, but you would prefer to pay more money for a perfect file than to discount it for something that you can't predict as much. Is that correct? Would you agree with that?
Yes. Yes,
Because you don't want to have to manage the problem, right? You would just assume have it good to begin with, correct?
Indeed, yes.
All right, awesome. I agree.
A good product is a better product than a discounted product.
Exactly. Okay, exactly it. So anything else you want to add? Sohail, we're going to wrap this up and go. I got Alan back on. Any one last piece of advice before we ship off? And we're going to give everybody the contact information to how to get these notes underwritten. We're going to provide a blueprint that gives them a checklist and all this stuff on best business practices and how to emulate what a bank does, so that they can either hire people to do it the right way. I will tell you this: do not try to do any of this yourself, but find capable, competent team of individuals that can help you structure this. To Mahmoud's point, it could be 10 or 15%. That's a lot of money. Anything else you want to add, Alan, before we wrap this up?
No, I want to reiterate, the loan drafting attorneys are not going to provide anywhere near a similar service as an RMLO. We're not going to protect you. We don't know how to. We're not an RMLO, so you've got to get them involved, and it's whatever it costs. It's minimal as to comparing to when it's a problem and you're trying to fix it.
And that's a great point. So because like you said, you know what you do well, but you don't know what Sohail does. You don't know what Mahmoud's looking to do. You don't know what what an RMLO does. So you're operating with limited information, and that's not a good thing in this space. You would happily do it if you knew what it was that needed to be done, but it has to come from some other place. That's why the RMLO is so important. So, all right, guys, I am going to stop this here. Thanks for the time, and hope this is of value to the people that are watching. And thanks for having the time to share with the group.
Thanks for letting us be a part.
All right.
Thanks, Jeff.
All right. Thanks to Alan, Sohail, and Mahmood. Hope that was of value. So real quick as we wrap this up, guys, if you want to get educated and understand compliance training and underwriting, these are some of the things that we talk about: how to protect the note holder, the software, and how to analyze deals, the support that Alan comes in and Sohail comes in and supports the community. Because this is really important, because whether you're a note buyer or a private money lender, understand that when these deals come in from somebody else, this is how they're learning and training and getting educated so that we can create the best notes possible. Okay. We have the certification, we have the private money lender note network, the note portal management, a bunch of things that we've already talked about. If you want any more information on this, just reach out to support@creativedealmaker.com and we'll get you everything that you need. So wrapping this up here, again, here's my contact information. Make sure you reach out to us if you have any questions regarding how to create a note, how to buy a note, how to service a note, all that stuff. We're happy to assist you, because it's all about education in the community. And finally, if you want any access to any of the information, just reach out to support@creativedealmaker.com. Reference Cashflow Expo in the subject line, and we'll send you links to some compliance and underwriting guidelines, access to the software to help analyze deals as a lender if you need to, the perfect note blueprint checklist, so you can take these checklists and know exactly what makes up those 500 pages of documentation, and plus some case studies and some other bonuses. Thank you again for letting me share our wealth of knowledge to you at Cashflow Expo. Thank you to Tracy and Fred. Anything we can do to help you, please reach out. You have a great day, and we look forward to seeing you guys sometime soon. Take care.